Hi, everybody. This is Mac Prichard of Mac's List. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to have you be part of this webinar about how to make your job search faster and easier. I'm going to wait a few minutes before we start the formal presentation to welcome people, and I think about 5 minutes or so, maybe a little less. We had, I think it was more than 300 people register for today's event. I'm looking over at Ben to my right. And so people are going to be calling in for the next couple of minutes. If you have a moment, please say hello using the comment box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And tell us where you're from, and if you've got a question that you'll want us to address, we can do that both during the webinar and at the end of the session. And let me pause for a moment and introduce my colleagues. To my left is Becky Thomas, our digital marketing manager.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. And then we also have Ben Forstag, our managing director. So Ben is keeping an eye on the webinar itself and all the technical parts so that we can have an uninterrupted program. And then Becky will be paying attention to your questions and shouting them out as we go along. And she'll be responding as well. So it looks like people are starting to say hello. And do we have anybody, Becky, coming from a long distance?
So far, Theron is in Eugene. He's headed to PDX soon. Lisa here from DC.
Okay.
Washington, DC.
Great.
Got our East Coast folks here.
Terrific.
Yeah, some Portland folks. Vancouver, good. Washington.
Okay. Great. We found at Mac's List that our weekly podcast, Find Your Dream Job, the show we publish every Wednesday, now attracts a national audience. 85% of the downloads are outside of Oregon, and of the total number of downloads, and we get about 20,000 downloads a month, 25% are overseas. So we expect today's webinar to attract people not just in Oregon or Southwest Washington, where many of our job listings are, but from all across the United States. So welcome those of you who are calling in from afar. Great. Any questions yet, Becky, or words of wisdom from our listeners?
Not yet. Debbie has experienced an echo on the audio. So
okay.
Hopefully that will work out.
All right.
Sounding good on our end.
Yeah, bear with us. And if you continue to hear an echo, please let us know. Okay. And if people have other comments about the technical presentation, I'm assuming that the image is coming across just fine. Okay. Well, for those of you who are in Oregon or in Washington State, we want to make sure you know about our next event that's happening here at the University of Portland, and that's at the end of the month. And this is a networking event. We're going to focus on how to find work in the nonprofit sector. And you can find out details about the event and the panel and other information by visiting the events tab of Mac's List. We'll also mention it in our weekly newsletter that goes out every Tuesday. And I'm guessing that the listeners, people who've joined us today, know about our newsletters. But if you don't, please visit our website. And every Tuesday we publish a newsletter with a list of that week's new jobs. Typically there are about 100 positions, and they're largely in the Pacific Northwest. On Wednesday, we have a newsletter for podcast listeners. We share the show notes from that week's episode that's published on Wednesday morning. And if you haven't checked out our podcast, please do so. It's a 35 to 40-minute show. It's free. Every week, I talk to a different national career expert about the nuts and bolts of job hunting. Becky answers a listener question, and Ben shares a resource of the week. And Jessica Black, our community coordinator, not only runs the soundboard, she joins us as a co-host as well. But in the show notes, you'll find links to all the resources mentioned in the show, as well as information about that week's guest. And on Thursday, we have a job resources newsletter. We include all of the posts that were published that week on the MaxList blog, as well as the content from that week's podcast. And so that newsletter as well is free. And you can sign up for one or all three newsletters by visiting the website. So I think we're at about 5 minutes after, and we're going to get started. Ben's going to reach in here and hit the right buttons.
Beware the trippy screen effect here, guys.
You're going to see a little bit of an infinity there for a moment after my headshot flashes away. Okay, there you go. And we're going straight into the screens. And this is the second of a two-part series. The first part rather, was last week. And today we're going to talk about how to make your next job search faster and easier, because we all want to, I think everybody's willing to work hard to find a job. We don't want to waste any energy, and we certainly don't want to waste any time. A recording of this webinar will be available on the MaxList blog and we'll post that. And we also encourage you to, if you have additional questions that you don't raise during today's session, share them on the blog in the comments section, because we find the more we engage you all in our community in conversations about job hunting and careers, you all have so much to offer, the more we all benefit. So let's jump into today's presentation. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the hidden job market, and we touched on this last week, and by the way, that webinar is also on our blog. But we want to talk about what the hidden job market is, just a quick refresher, and why it matters. And then we're going to take you through 7 job search shortcuts, things that I've seen job seekers do over the years to get their next job faster and easier. And some of this work is going to require you getting outside of your comfort zone. And we're going to talk about ways to manage that. And then finally, we want to leave plenty of time for your questions. So if you've got questions, put them in the comments box, and Becky will share them with me as we go through the presentation. We'll also answer your questions at the end of the session. And I think those are the main points. Let's just talk quickly about MaxList. For the benefit of people who may not be familiar with us, it is an online community. The heart of it is a website, maxlist.org. It tracks about 40,000 unique visitors a month. You'll find a job board there with positions in Oregon and Washington. But most jobs, as many of you may know, and we'll talk more about in a moment, never make it to any job board. They're filled through word of mouth and through recommendations. They're part of what's called the hidden job market. And that's to help people navigate that job market. We publish a blog with practical tips about job hunting and career management. We also publish our weekly podcast on Wednesday mornings. We have several books. One is about job hunting in Portland. Another is about job hunting anywhere. Both are available on our website and on Amazon. And to get the word out about all this great content, we publish those 3 weekly newsletters that I mentioned earlier. And if you're in the Portland area, we do local events here at universities and colleges, and we have other great partners. Our next event, as I mentioned, is at the University of Portland at the end of this month. And in addition to the in-person events, we do occasional webinars like this that are free to help people, again, get a job that they can not only enjoy but love, and find work that matters. The bottom line for us is we want people to find work that has meaning and purpose. So some of this might be familiar material for those of you who joined us last week, but I just want to emphasize again why we spend so much of our time and energy on educational resources. Job boards matter. You need to check them regularly, and not just MaxList. But the truth is that most jobs never get advertised. You're not going to find them on MaxList or any job board. And that might surprise you, because there's an estimate out there that there are 40,000 niche job boards in the United States. And you would think with so many platforms that the market would be saturated with every available posting. But here's the fact of the matter. Most jobs are filled by word of mouth, and there are estimates out there that these so-called hidden jobs account for as many as 80% of all available positions. And the way it works is that people get jobs through the people they know. The hidden job market, very quickly, it's driven by connections. And I know when people hear this, they think that's unfair. But I think it's important to recognize how the system works, because once you understand how the system works, you can make it work for you. The bottom line about the hidden job market is this. It's really human nature that's at work here. There's no conspiracy. It's that people, when they're ready to make a hiring decision, turn to people they've worked with in the past, people they trust, or they look at candidates who are recommended by people they trust. And the reason hiring managers do this is because hiring is an expensive, risky decision. If you don't get it right, it's going to take you perhaps 3, 6, maybe even 12 months to figure out that it wasn't a good fit. And then you've got to start all over again. So to manage that risk, hiring managers, again, turn to people they know or who are recommended to them by people they trust. So that's how the job market works, and the hidden job market. And I just want to share with you, to put this into context, how many opportunities are out there. Every month on Mac's List, we're based in Oregon. We get about 500 jobs a month. And the Oregon Employment Department estimates that there are 80,000 online job postings out there. So the unposted jobs in our state could be as many as 400,000. When you are thinking about how you spend your time, so many people spend 100% of their time looking at job boards. You really need to step away from the computer and and get out and take part in that hidden job market. And we're going to talk now about how to do that. And we're going to share with you 7 shortcuts, 7 job search hacks. So when we talked last week in the webinar, and if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I encourage you to do so. We talked about job search mistakes. And one of the number one mistakes we see job seekers make, and candidly, I did this myself early in my career, is that people say they want to keep their options open when they're asked about their job search goals. And I can understand why this is so. You may be eager to work and you don't want to close the door to any opportunity. But the problem with that approach is if you're not clear about what you want, it's hard for people to help you. You've got to have focus. So the number one hack here is, and this is really fundamental to any search, is you have to have focus. And you've got to set 1, 2, or 3 goals. And I say it could be up to 3 because sometimes, we're uncertain. There might be 2 kinds of opportunities that interest us. We can't decide. We need to spend some time doing the research, doing the homework to sort that out. A lot of the techniques that we shared last week about informational interviewing and goal setting will help you do that, but you've got to have that focus. You need to avoid, above all, what's often called the spray and pray approach. This is when people go in, look at job boards every day, and they apply everywhere. And the problem is, we talked about last week with that approach, is employers want people who are passionate about the work that the employer offers. They want people who are clear about what they offer an employer and the problems they can solve for an employer. And when you're applying everywhere, trying to be all things to all employers, you're just not going to be persuasive and credible as a candidate. And the competition is intense. Many online job postings attract hundreds of applications, and you need to stand out in those crowded fields. Job search hack number 2. You need to speak up and share your job search goals. Sometimes people are reluctant to talk about their job search, and they may be, candidly embarrassed or maybe ashamed that they're unemployed. I've gone through 3 periods of unemployment myself. 2 were very long. One was 8 months, another 10 months. So I remember there were days when the last thing I wanted to do was tell people I was out of work personally. But you need to, don't be shy and don't be embarrassed if you're between positions. Just tell people that you're looking, and you need to share what it is you want to do. So when you're a good way to do this is when people ask, what do you do for a living or what you're up to, say that you're in transition. And if you stop there, there's likely to be kind of an awkward silence. But if you say, I'm exploring opportunities with communications jobs and nonprofit organizations, particularly interested in working for this kind of company, that might be if you're in Oregon, Mercy Corps, that when you're that specific, it starts a conversation. And it gives the listener, the person you're talking to, an opportunity to react or perhaps even tell you about a connection or a thought they might have that would be useful to you in your search. And again, the more specific you are about your goals, the easier your job search is going to be. Job search hack number 3. You need to tap into your network, and you not only need to use your network, you got to serve your network, because the hidden job market, it's driven by connections and relationships. Who you know matters. And you don't have to have gone to an Ivy League school or been born in a family that belongs to a country club or have connections to the mayor or the governor to get a great job. What you need to do is reach out to the people that you know, and we all have a network through schools, neighborhoods, faith communities, former employers, and let people know what you're looking for and where you hope to go. Because even the weakest of connections, and it can be a friend of a friend of a friend, can make all the difference in a search. And the way you use you tap into your network is through what's called networking. And that means getting out and meeting and seeing people. You go to industry events, when you are just going through your normal social life, you let people know that you're looking. But it's not only about asking for help, it's also about serving others and being of service. The people who have the most success in their careers, I've found, are those who help others and give and serve others without any expectation of getting anything in return. So make time to talk to others about their job search, volunteer for groups in your community or your industry, share your ideas and your energy. There's an old Beatles song with that lyric, "The love you take is equal to the love you make." And the same is true in professional networking. The more you put into your network, the more you'll get back. Here's an example of how word of mouth works and how networking works. I had a career in state government here in Oregon. I was a speechwriter to a governor. I was a spokesman for different state agencies. And this email came to me about 3 years ago from a former colleague in Oregon state government. He ran communications for the state forestry department. We'd stayed in touch, and when he was getting ready to move on to retirement, he reached out to me and other trusted colleagues and contacts to let us know that his job was opening up. And I did send a couple of candidates his way, and he made the time to talk to each one of them. And while none of those people actually got the job, they all went in through a kind of back door for what was a very public, formal hiring process. And their applications got full consideration. This is how the hidden job market works. And I'm guessing that if you're a hiring manager on this webinar, you've probably sent out a version of this email at one or more points in your career. If you're a job seeker, you may have heard about opportunities through emails like this, but this is how networks work. And if you want to get these kinds of emails, you need to pay attention to your network and be of service to it. So let's go back to the hacks and the shortcuts. Number 4, tell people you're looking. It's, again, sometimes people are embarrassed, or they're just about being between jobs. It's a natural feeling. Again, I've been there myself. Or perhaps we're just shy and reserved. It's hard to talk about ourselves and our goals and interests. Whatever the reason, it's important to tell people you're looking, because you never know who you meet might know about opportunities, or could make an introduction, or perhaps has a connection to a company or an organization where you want to work. Here's a very simple thing you can do if you to let people know, in addition to one-on-one conversations. Consider doing a simple announcement on LinkedIn or in Facebook in your status update, and tell people in a positive way. I'm excited about looking for my next opportunity. I'm exploring opportunities for these kinds of jobs in this kind of world. Would welcome any suggestions or contacts, and you don't rely on one message alone to activate your network. You need to do other things, but it's a way of publicly declaring that you're out on the job hunt, and you will hear from people, and doors will open as a result. Hack number 5: do informational interviews. Longtime Max List readers and podcast listeners know we're huge fans at Max List of informational interviews. It's probably the number one most important thing you can do to turbocharge your job search. And an informational interview, I want to be clear, it's a business meeting. It's not about meeting people for coffee or picking someone's brain. It's a structured, organized conversation with a clearly identified outcome and purpose, and you are in charge of this meeting. Sometimes people who go on these informational interviews say to me, gosh, I don't think that really worked. I didn't get a job offer. That's not the purpose of an informational interview. You'll know an informational interview has been successful if you accomplish 3 things. The first is that your host knows about your background, your goals, and your accomplishments. That means they'll keep you in mind for specific opportunities because they know who you are and what you're looking for. The second thing that you accomplish in one of these meetings is that you get insights into your industry or your field. And you also will often uncover potential job openings, and you'll get a sense of what companies or nonprofits in your world are growing and expanding and who the leaders are. Those kinds of insights are invaluable in uncovering and getting hidden jobs. The third thing that you accomplish at these meetings is you get introductions or referrals to 2 or 3 other people who that you want to contact with and network with. And that helps you grow your network. So if you do those 3 things, share your story and your goals, get insights into your industry, and grow your network, and you can do all these things in a 20 to 30 minute conversation. Those are all big steps in moving your job search forward. Final thing about informational interviews: don't ask for a job. This is about building relationships, growing your network, getting insights, and it's not about asking someone who probably doesn't even have a job to offer for an opportunity. Other ways you can grow your network besides these one-on-one meetings: go to networking events in your field. We all have professional associations in our occupation. Find those groups. There might be several. Shop around, see which ones you think are most closely match your goals, and consider volunteering in addition to attending events. And when you do this, you'll begin to grow and enhance your reputation and become a trusted and recognized leader in your field, and that is always helpful. So we talked about industry events here. That's job search hack number 6. Let's move on to number 7. And again, volunteering. This is, I think, whether you do it in your industry or in your community, the value of volunteering is you show people what you can do. And when people see the results you produce, it's going to help you grow and strengthen relationships. I want to say something about volunteering as a way of getting a job. Sometimes, particularly in the nonprofit world, people will volunteer at an organization in the hopes that if they give their time, eventually, and they do good work, that volunteer position will turn into a paid job. And that rarely happens. And it's because those volunteer positions typically they are volunteer and the budgets are limited. So I think if you are going to volunteer, think about the outcomes that you can get from that experience. And there are a couple of them. One is it allows you to get experience in a sector where maybe it's one you want to move into and you don't have a lot of direct experience. Another benefit is it lets you build relationships with people in a field, and you can, once you establish those relationships, ask for help in the form of introductions or insights into occupations in that industry. Those are real tangible benefits that can help you move your job search along. And I think they alone, plus just the experience of giving to others and making a difference, make volunteering both personally and professionally a great strategy. So a refresher rather, for people who joined us last week, but maybe if you didn't join us, these were the 4 big mistakes that we see people make in a job search. And again, you can go to the blog and find our webinar. But number 1 is keeping your options open, being open, trying to be all things to all employers. It doesn't work for brands and it doesn't work for job candidates. Mistake number 2, applying everywhere all the time. And the problem with this is you're competing with hundreds of others, and a number of whom are specialists in that area and are clear about what they want and clear about what they offer. And that's a tough field to compete in. Mistake number 3 is spending all your time on job boards. We're very proud of our job board at MaxList and the value it offers job seekers and employers, but it is only one part of a complete successful job search. You probably should only spend about 20, 30, at tops 40% of your time on job boards. The remainder of your time should be out there looking for and pursuing the hidden jobs. And you do that again through informational interviews, attending industry events, and volunteering. Mistake number 4 is waiting to be picked. And you may know, for example, that you want to work at a particular company. So you check the job board at that company regularly, and that's a good thing to do. But when a position opens up at that organization and you apply, if you don't have any relationships inside, the odds are stacked against you, no matter how well qualified you might be. A better approach is, if you indeed want to work at a particular company or nonprofit, start building relationships with people now, and look for ways to connect with them at industry events, through networking or informational interviews. So when positions do open up, you're a known quantity. There are people on the inside who know you. And again, it could be a weak connection. They don't know you well, but if you've made a positive impression, that could be enough to help you make it into the interview process. So I want to walk through just what a typical job search looks like. And I do this because I want to step back. We've talked about shortcuts and we've talked about mistakes. And this is the model we see people often pursue, and we hope that you won't do that in the future. But I also want to recognize that the strategies that I've outlined can be hard to do. Networking isn't easy for a lot of people, but know this: it is a learnable skill, and it's one you can master. I know because I was very shy in my early 20s, which is unusual, I think, for somebody who was bent on a career in public relations and politics. But in the end, it's not our personalities. Personalities matter, but whether you're shy or introverted, these are our ways, these are personality styles. Job hunting and networking are skills that anybody can learn, introverts or extroverts. I learned my basic networking skills in my mid-20s, and it's made a big, big difference in my career. And I see the people who do that as well have success too. Everybody, here's a typical job search approach. People typically look for jobs online, and they apply for jobs cold. They don't have any connection to the hiring manager or the employer, and they're not happy with the results because typically the results are not very good. And when this approach doesn't work, people panic. They double down on that strategy. They apply more. They visit more websites, become less selective, and in the end, they start carpet bombing the internet with applications. That doesn't lead to better results either, and it's like almost a vicious cycle. And I see so many people get stuck in it. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of mental energy, and the results again are a little more than frustration and anger. Most people do break free of this cycle, but it takes them months to do so. And finally, when they do hit bottom, they take a different approach. And they end up choosing a networking first job search strategy. And when they do that, they begin to see results. That's exactly what happened to me. I went through a major period of unemployment when I was 25. And I've seen many people have the same experience, other colleagues and countless other people. So if you're stuck in this cycle, or better yet, you want to avoid it, I want you to think about networking as your primary job search strategy. And I think ultimately, the reason I think targeting the hidden job market is a better and faster approach is because of the results you get. And it does take work. You got to learn new skills, and you have to push the boundaries of your comfort zone. But when you take this networking first approach, here's what happens. You find the best job opportunities out there, the ones that are never published on Mac's List or any job board or in any newspaper. You get to connect with the people in your field, and you'll meet people in these conversations if you stay in that field, you'll continue to cross paths with for years and years to come, and you'll build real relationships with them. And they will think of you at different points of your career when opportunities arise. The other thing you get from a networking approach strategy is you figure out what objections an employer might have about your candidacy. And you do that before you walk into the interview room because you've done informational interviews with leaders in your field. And that insight is going to help you be so much more effective compared to other candidates in the interview process. You can also you can go in through what sometimes is called the back door. You avoid the formal application processes. Sometimes for particularly public agency jobs, they're always going to be posted. But there's always an informal hiring process because in the end, the people who are selected for interviews usually many of them have connections to the hiring manager, because it goes back to what we talked about at the start of the webinar. People hire people they know, or they hire people who are recommended to those they trust. Finally, I think the biggest benefit of all, besides getting a job you can love and doing work that matters, is you get less rejection and less frustration. And who doesn't want to save time and energy? Because frankly, for many people, the idea of looking for a job is about as entertaining as going to the dentist and having a root canal without anesthetic. So let's avoid that. and there are ways to do that. We've laid them out here. We can talk more about them later in the presentation, but let's go to you, our listeners, for questions. Okay, Ben is taking us back to the chat box. You've got a lot of questions.
Yep, all that tapping has been chatting in the webinar here.
Good.
So we will get started.
All right.
First question, we'll go back to an earlier portion in the webinar, was from Peter. So when we were talking about setting like 1 to 3 focus goals for your job search, what do these goals typically look like? What kinds of tactical advice can you share to help people set those goals?
One way I've seen people do it very well, Peter, is inside each of us, I think we have a short list of jobs we'd like to do. I'd like to work at this company, or I'd like to be this at that nonprofit. And so whatever those are, write them down. And usually those lists are 3, 4, sometimes 5 occupations or specific employers. Once you've written that down, identify people who are doing that kind of work and set up conversations with them. And the way you find them, if you don't know them personally, is you check resources like your LinkedIn page, and you can search easily if you've identified a company where you'd like to work, or you can sort by occupation if there's a job someone has that you'd like to have one day. You can use LinkedIn to find those people or those companies. I also encourage you to look at your alumni database. Whatever college or university you went to, chances are there's somebody, a grad, who's working at the company where you'd like to be, or somebody doing the job you'd like to have. And if you reach out to them for a conversation, they'll make the time to meet you. And here's what happens when you write down those specific jobs and then you set up these conversations. As you talk to people, you'll figure out pretty quickly, Peter, whether you want to do that kind of work or work in that kind of organization or with that kind of employer. And you'll get a lot more excited about 1 or 2 of those occupations on your list of 4 or 5 than maybe 2 or 3 of them. And then so follow your energy, and because it'll help you get clear about the job that you want the most. And when you have that clarity and your list goes from 4 or 5 possible goals to 1 or 2, then you can use your time more effectively and focus on the people, the events, the associations that are going to help you get that job.
Great. All right. Next question comes from Trina.
Hi, Trina.
Could you address being over 50 and new to the area? So Trina, like not knowing anyone where you've moved, are there different approaches for older professionals that can help with that?
Well, for whatever your age, when you're new to an area, I think it's important to recognize you need to invest some time in building a network in your new home. And you can do that in a number of ways. First, we've all got hobbies or interests or organizations or faith communities that we're part of. Make sure you're getting out and doing those things and following your interests. Second, when you're pay attention to your professional goals, and there's going to be 1 or more professional associations, Trina, for your occupation. And you should find those groups and start attending their events and consider volunteering for a short-term project. It's a great way to meet people, show people what you can do. I'm a big believer in volunteering to organize events because they're quick. They're usually in a month's time. They're over. It's not like serving on a board for 3 years. And you can move on to the next event. I mentioned earlier alumni databases for universities and college. Virtually every college or university has an alumni association or chapter in big cities like Portland. And if it's a home state college, even in smaller towns, you'll find some kind of chapter. maybe that people are just getting together to watch the football game on Saturday or Sunday. But it's a great way. It's another way of connecting and meeting people when you're new in town. For people who are over 50, and I turned 59 in 3 weeks, there are special challenges with job hunting. Ageism in hiring is illegal. It's difficult to fight those cases legally because of the time and expense and energy involved. In the short term, probably the better strategy is this. Think about the misconceptions employers might have about older workers. Common misconceptions out there include that we're not interested in learning new technology, we're going to be too expensive to hire because we're senior in our careers, we're looking for a place to retire. And those are just 3. We could go on and add to the list. But the point is this: you need to address those misconceptions in your application materials and in your interviews. Now, and we're talking about boomers or people over 50 now. Millennials struggle with this too. I mean, the ageism also applies to people who are in their 20s, and there's misconception about what kind of employees they make. And so whether you're in your 20s or 50s, recognize these misconceptions and address them up front, because the employer is never going to bring them up, chances are.
Great. Okay, next question comes from Sherry.
Sherry.
I am wondering how to identify who you might request an informational interview with, specifically for public agencies and more state and county jobs.
Yeah.
How do you find that person?
Well, I think it starts with identifying the work you want to do. So let's say you're in Portland, Oregon, and you want to work for the Multnomah County Public Health Department. And I'm making this up, Sherry, but let's say you're you've got a master's in public health, or you're a registered nurse. And if you haven't worked in the county government before, I think you need to look at the people inside that agency, as well as related organizations that do work with that particular department. And how do you find those people to have conversations with them? Again, go to LinkedIn and search by by the name of that department. Go to the department's website. Look at the staff list. Go to your your county or university, your college or university alumni database. See if there are grads who have worked at that agency. Tell people that you want to reach out to, you want to talk to people at that particular agency. We had at a Max List event at the University of Portland this summer, a panelist whose goal was to work at Mercy Corps, and she didn't know anyone at Mercy Corps. She tried some of the things that I mentioned, drew a blank, but she was relentless in telling people that she knew professionally and personally that she wanted to work at Mercy Corps, and then she followed up with, do you know anyone there I can talk to? And the story she told was that after some months, it was like the fiance of somebody's in-law, of a neighbor, who said, "Oh, I know somebody who works at Mercy Corps. I'm sure he would see you. Of course, he's a CPA." And she wanted to work in fundraising. But she went to see this fellow, and he said, "Oh, we have an internship program coming up. You should go talk to so-and-so here at Mercy Corps about that opportunity." That led to the summer internship, which led to her getting hired in the fall. She would never have known about the internship or gotten a job offer eventually if she hadn't made a point of telling people that is specifically where she wanted to work. So there are 4 or 5 suggestions about how you could find those people. And then once you do, I'm a big believer again in the value of informational interviews, having structured conversations where you begin to sit down and talk with these folks about your interest in working at that kind of agency or that agency in particular, and finding out how they hire and what kind of challenges they face and what they look for in candidates.
Great. And on that note, we had several questions about informational interviews.
Yeah.
I know you'll be excited about that, Matt. And so a couple of them are just sort of clarifying. Like,
sure.
We need more background about informational interviews. Michael asked, I don't understand informational interviews at all. How do I actually request one from a company, and why should they want to take the time? So maybe you could help folks.
Yeah, it's a great question.
That.
Yeah. We do outline how to request an informational interview. We go into some detail about this in our book, how to land a dream job anywhere, or how to land your dream job in Portland. We've got a number of blog posts on this topic, so I encourage you to go to the website and just search under informational interviews. And some of them get really granular. And we've also done several podcast interviews about this. And if you're not a podcast listener, that's okay. If you go to the website and search again under informational interviews, you'll see a transcript of our conversations with experts about how to do this. Quickly, the way to request an informational interview is, once you've identified the person, send an email, and a subject line could be, I'm writing at the suggestion of Ben Forstag, who's our managing director here at MaxList. And the email could be as simple as this: Hi, Mary. I'm Ben Forstag suggested I contact you. I'm currently exploring opportunities and working in public health in state government in Washington. As you can see from the attached resume, I've had considerable experience in healthcare policy at the state and federal level. Ben thought you might be a good source of information about opportunities in healthcare in Washington state government, and as well as could help me identify other people I might speak to. And I wonder if you might have 20 to 30 minutes to meet. I'm available typically on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 3 to 5. However, I'd be happy to accommodate your schedule. And I would say specifically, would you be available for a 30-minute meeting? Please let me know what might work for you. I look forward to hearing from you. So what are you doing in that communication? You're being clear about your goal. You're interested in working in healthcare in Washington state government. You're explaining who sent you, Ben Forstag, the managing director of MaxList. You're clear about what you want, 30 minutes of somebody's time, and what you want to talk about. You have an agenda for the meeting, and you've provided specific times so someone can look at their calendar and say, okay, I can't meet between 3 to 5 on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursday, but here are other times where I could meet, or maybe they are available during those times, but you've made it easy for them to say yes. And you've also provided your resume, so if they want to learn more about you and your background and qualifications, they can do that, and they will click through and look at it. So that's how you ask for that meeting. And I would say quickly, if you don't hear back within a week, follow up. Most people I've found will respond if they haven't on the first attempt when you make a second attempt. If you don't hear back after the second attempt, try again one more time, maybe 2 weeks later. And but it's persistence that will pay. The reason people take these meetings is because most of us, and I think it's almost universally true, we want to be of help to others. We do want to be of service. When people say no or don't respond, it's because we haven't been clear about how someone can help us, or they're just busy. So our challenge when we're requesting these appointments is to be crystal clear about what we want. And if we don't hear right back, just politely follow up as you would with any business appointment. Most of us don't give up after the first attempt. We try a second or even a third time. I'll say people I know who have sent those kinds of requests, and I personally have sent several hundred of them, eventually get in to see almost anybody. I've probably done 300 or 400 informational interviews in a 30-plus year career. I can count on one hand the number of people who said no.
Great. And then Rebecca also asked about cold asks, and I think part of that sort of why should they want to take the time is if you express that clear connection, you know someone they know. I think that really helps a lot.
I do too, Becky, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's all about relationships, and even if there's not a direct personal relationship, if you met in passing at an event, or you're graduates of the same school or members of the same faith community, even the weakest of connections can create those personal ties that make all the difference.
Great. So let's move on to part of the presentation. We talked about the typical job search cycle. That's sort of like you're on your own at your computer, you're panicking because you're not hearing back, and so you keep applying, and it's sort of that circle of no progress.
Yeah.
So a couple of folks were asking in the comments sort of like how to address that toll that it takes on your confidence, and how do you like tactically, how do you break out of that cycle and fight that job search fatigue to do something new?
No, those are great questions. It is discouraging to look for work and the rejection that comes with it. I think two things come to mind. One is the more you can learn from and use strategies that are effective in finding work, the more success you'll have. And I think most of us, and this was certainly true for me early in my career, I just didn't know any better. I thought, okay, the way I look for work is I look for pre-internet days, I look at newspaper ads and I respond to them and I wait for someone to call me. And today it's job boards. And because we don't know any better, we haven't mastered job hunting as a skill. That's what we do, and we get frustrated as a result. So there is another way, and there are many books about this and classes. We've got one. But it largely comes down to being clear about your goals and using personal relationships and networking to find out about hidden jobs and getting the insights you need to present yourself as a great candidate. And treating a job search basically is one of the most important business projects you're going to have this year. You walk into interviews prepared and you're clear about what you want and offer. You don't wing it. In terms of dealing with the rejection, and even no matter how well prepared you are, it's a competitive process. People are going to say no. You're not going to bat 1,000. So it's important to carve out time for the things you enjoy, family, friends, personal hobbies, and especially if you don't get a job you really had your heart set on, take a day off and recognize it might take a few months to get the job you want, and there's going to be a certain amount of rejection along the way. And you just gotta take care of yourself.
Awesome. All right, so let's take a different approach here. So Heather asks about options for practicing job interviews.
Yeah.
Some quick tactical tips there.
Well, first of all, it's kudos to you, Margot, for preparing. Again, not a majority, but a significant number of candidates I've met along the way just walk into a room without preparation. So quick tips. You need to walk into the room with questions. Don't ask questions about anything you could have learned by looking at the website or looking at someone's LinkedIn profile. Virtually anything you can find in a 30 to 60 minute web search. Second, recognize that this is about the employer and the employer's needs, and they've got problems. So you want to, as much as possible, find out what their challenges are before you walk into the room. And in the time that you have to ask questions, you want to draw them out about what their problems are. And you want to listen to what they tell you, and then so that you can share with them examples of how you've dealt with similar problems in the past professionally and solved them, or offer your own ideas. my favorite question to ask in a job interview, and is when it's my turn as a candidate and to ask questions. I'll say to the hiring manager, if I'm fortunate enough to get this job, and you and I are sitting down in 12 months to talk about my annual review, what are the 3 things you want me to tell you I've done for you? And a couple things happen when you ask that question, Margot. One is hiring managers are usually surprised because most candidates aren't thinking about their needs. They're only about the company's needs. They're often just thinking about their own professional goals. Second is they're going to tell you about something that hasn't been mentioned in the job posting or in the interview questions of the conversation to date. That gives you the opportunity as a candidate to outshine the other people you're competing with, because you're going to start talking about needs that employer has that the other candidates don't know about. And the third thing that happens is the employer starts treating you almost like a peer, because it usually leads to a conversation about, well, have you tried this? What about that? And you're working with them to actually deal with a problem that is on their desk right now.
All right, next question.
Okay.
Ari asks, besides serving an organization you might be passionate about, what are the key advantages when working for a nonprofit?
Well, I think a number of advantages come to mind. In addition to the personal satisfaction you might get from that helping to achieve that organization's mission, I think that nonprofits have a different culture than the private sector, it's up to you as either a candidate or as an employee at that organization what kind of culture you prefer. But I think there's a mission-centered ethos you get in a nonprofit that sometimes you don't find in the private sector, and the opportunity to make a difference about issues you care about and make a difference in people's lives and in the community. And I, having worked at nonprofits and seen people who've made a career in that sector, I've seen the satisfaction that can provide and can bring.
All right. Mark asks, when an online application requires you provide desired salary requirements, how would you answer? This is before a possible interview. How broad of a range would you recommend folks give in that situation?
Yeah. We did a podcast episode about this, Mark. It's called How to Answer the Desired Salary Question. And I know we're going to have to wrap up because we're at the top of the hour. I encourage you to go to maxlist.org. On the nav bar at the top, you'll see podcast. Click through, and the guest was Jim Hopkinson. Very quickly, what he encourages you to do is to postpone discussion about that as much as possible. If it's an online form and you have to fill it out, if you can put in text, Jim suggests just saying, happy to discuss this at a later date. If you have to put in a number, Jim has some very specific suggestions about how to do it. Again, you can either listen to the show or read the transcript, but it's actually one of our most popular episodes. So the question you're raising here is a good one. So Ben is giving me the high sign, and we want to be respectful of people's time. It's at the top of the hour. And Becky, can you tell me how we're going to respond to the remainder of the questions?
Well, we can certainly respond to those folks via email after the webinar individually. Okay. But I think that we do have a few more things to share with the audience about the new course and things like that. So if you guys want to stick around for a couple minutes, that'd be great. Okay, well, great. Well, Ben's going to take us back to the slides here. Bear with me. Actually, he's telling me I should do it. No, it's just the video. Okay. I'm sorry. I should just stay on video. So quickly, we do have a course. It's called Hack the Hidden Job Market, and it lays out in 12 video modules all the strategies in granular detail about how to find and get hidden jobs. And we've given you the headlines here, an overview of how this market works and how
how you might crack this system. And but if you really want to dig into this, I encourage you to join the class. It's going to be open. It's going to be open starting November 6th, and this is the third time we've opened it up. We limit access to the course for a limited time because we work with a small group of students, typically 40 to 50 at a time. It's an on-demand course, but we also have a private Facebook group where every day we respond to questions, and there are conversations among Ben and myself and Becky and the students, as well as among the students themselves. And we do a monthly video session where we answer people's questions and do special presentations. So I hope that you'll consider joining the class. It's only going to be open for a week. You'll get an email about it. And if you are interested in doing something different and other than looking at job boards, and please keep coming to our job board, but I hope we've made it clear that that should only be one part of your job search strategy. If you'd like to learn how to crack this system, I hope you'll consider joining the class. So next steps, this webinar and the slides will be on the blog. We encourage you to post your questions there that occur after this session, and we can respond to them there as well. We'd love to get your ideas or comments about how we can improve future presentations. And we want to make sure that you learn from each other. One of the most powerful things we see happen at our events here in Portland is job seekers start talking to each other, and they have so much to offer each other. And they begin to, and that can make a big, big difference in anybody's job search. So again, there are many, many resources about job hunting on our website. Please go to maximus.org, and thank you all for joining us today.